how are things going out west?
Things are going pretty good. I kind of feel like a guy who's in mid-transition. I've been hosting the local show here in Vancouver for a few years, about 3 years, and I had my last show of the local show, just a few weeks ago. And so since then, I've been full on in planning and development of the new national, and we've been working on some stories for that we want to roll out for when the show actually launches. Next week I'll be flying to PEI and doing some shooting out on Vancouver Island as well. So kind of busy, and then of course making time for people such as yourself to do a few interviews here and there. So yeah, keeping busy, but feeling good.
As being one of the new hosts, has it hit you yet that you're going to be hosting the national?
Yeah, and I think it probably took a few weeks after the big reveal of who the 4 hosts of the national would be for it to really sink in for me, because that, you have to remember, that whole reveal, so I guess we're going back a couple months now, but that was, it all came together really, really quickly. Like, the 4 hosts, we only found out who the other hosts were, found out about each other a few days before the announcement. So, a lot of us were completely in the dark about the whole thing. And then all of a sudden it's, hey, you're the 4. We want you to host this program. It's been quite the ride. I think it's definitely sunk in now, but it'll really be real come November 6th, right? Once we launch and once we, we're finally able to do our jobs, and that is, deliver the news on a daily basis. So we can't wait. And, I think it'll be more real then, but for sure it's sunk in at this point. Absolutely.
You grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, and attended Carleton University. I don't want to kind of assume it, but if I was making a guess, I would say that you went to Carleton for journalism?
Yeah, absolutely. I did the 4-year undergrad program at Carleton, but funny enough, it wasn't journalism that I had always set out to do, even kind of in the lead up to university, because when I was younger, I had all sorts of, like a lot of people, I had all sorts of interests, ranging from music to literature, philosophy, and at the last minute, I'd kind of made 3 choices in terms of universities that I had applied to. So I applied at the University of Toronto for biotechnology, because I loved math and I loved science as well. I did back then in Ontario, we had 13 grades. And so I did, the highest level of calculus and algebra geometry and probability math and chemistry and physics and biology. And so I applied biotech at U of T, applied at University of Ottawa for biochemistry, and Carleton University for journalism. Those were the 3 picks. And it was just kind of completely out of left field that, as the deadline loomed, the realization struck me that I didn't really want to spend the rest of my life in a lab. Science it wasn't fun anymore. And so I decided, I've always had a passion for writing. I've always had a passion for storytelling. So let's give that a whirl. And 1 year turned to 2, turned to 3, turned to 4, and lo and behold, journalism ended up working out.
I agree with you, because a lot of people, when they're first starting off coming out of high school, they got to try to pick a path, and sometimes it's hard to pick a path when you have so many interests. Now, the only knock I'm going to give you, me, you, and Rosemary have something in common. We're all Carleton alumni. But if you had to go to University of Ottawa, I would have ripped you a little bit.
that would have been trouble. We would have been off on the wrong foot right out of the gate.
Yeah, I've done an interview with Lisa LaFlamme, and she said she went to University of Ottawa, and I said to her, no, this interview's done. I was like, I'm Carleton, you're University of Ottawa, I can't go any further.
Yeah, that's harsh, man. Are those rivalries still alive and strong, or is that like a back in the day thing?
No, honestly, the way that I look at it now from being an alumni is, while you're there, it's a healthy relationship of, getting that in your system of Carleton versus University of Ottawa. But then by the time you're in your 4th year, you're kind of like, well, there's no other university that I can do my master's in. So remember all that hate I had at the Gigi's? Yeah, I'm going to be part of one of you guys now. So let's put that in the past.
Well, I got to say, I didn't have that same kind of sense of rivalry. And especially in retrospect, funny enough, now that I think about it, my wife was a student at Ottawa U. Not that we knew each other back then, but, I kind of feel like now we're the marriage of 2 great schools. And that's, that's a good thing.
Let's put it this way, just as a joke. I don't want to interview your wife. She's University of Ottawa. That's how it's going. No, I'm only kidding. Where did you get your first start in broadcast and media?
It was at CBC, but in Montreal. So, while I was studying at Carleton University, you have all sorts of opportunities to pursue, different internships and apprenticeships at different media outlets. So I had done some print ones. I remember working in Kingston for a little while for the daily paper there, the Wake Standard. But I think it was in third year that I signed up for a 1-week internship at CBC Montreal.
Okay.
And during that week, you do all kinds of things. You kind of shadow people in radio and in TV. And a 1-week internship turned into a 3-week internship. They had asked me back to, because I guess, I was working hard and I was really enjoying it and was really interested in it. So they asked me back. I did 3 weeks. 3 weeks eventually turned into a summer job. And the summer job turned into, kind of consistent, steady, casual work. And then that turned into eventually, a full-time position, and then got into all sorts of stuff, from there, video journalism. So I did my own shooting and editing for a good while, and then eventually into anchoring. So it was kind of a wild ride from start to finish, but it all started back in, I guess it was 2004. That's when I would have started.
That I was going to say, because when you just said that it was a 1 week turned into 3 weeks, I was thinking like no one else could get coffee. Is that what you're trying to say? But no.
The demand for coffee is always there, right?
Yeah. No, and of course I joke around with it because I know, obviously you've gone on and done great things. You've got your name in Montreal that way. You've also, you fill in at the National from time to time when the other hosts are away, and you've set up shop pretty much as at one point you were even doing the Current as a filling in on the Current for CBC Radio. Yep. So tell me about your journey, because you started in Montreal, but now you're situated in Vancouver. So tell me how you basically went from Montreal to Vancouver.
Yeah, well, Montreal was such a great city to start working in because, there are two kind of paths you can take. One is as a young journalist trying to start in a major market like a Toronto or a Montreal or a Vancouver. And it's tough, right, to be able to do that. And so a lot of people will try to seek out opportunities elsewhere in, smaller towns, more rural parts or less populated cities across the country or even across the world. But Montreal was this really great city because it was a major city, right? I mean, it's one of the most populous cities in the country. But at the same time, it is, and especially back then, it is and continues to be predominantly Francophone. So the English media is very small by comparison. And so it was like reporting in a big city, but you had all of the opportunities that you might get in a small town. So it ended up being a sort of a perfect incubator for me. And the fact that I spoke French was a huge asset. It's difficult to be able to pull off that kind of a job when you don't speak French, because so many of the politicians, police officers, firefighters, people in all walks of life, many of them are unilingual Francophone, or at least they were back when I was getting my start. So Montreal was a really great city for that, and I spent 10 years there. If you had asked me when I started how long I'd spend there, I probably would have told you I'd be here for 3 years and then maybe move on from there. But gosh, what a great city. In terms of the transition to Vancouver, it just sort of snuck up on me. I mean, I got a call one day from one of the head honchos here in Vancouver saying, hey, look, we've been following your work. We've been, trying on and off to get you over here, and this was news to me. They'd been interested in having me over to do the job of the local anchor here for the supper time newscast in Vancouver. And I guess finally they said, you know what, we're ready to pull the trigger. We want to bring you out. We want to start having conversations with you. We want you to meet the team, and we want to redesign the show. We want it to be different than every other local newscast there is in the country. And so that, I think, on top of a number of other things, made it this really exciting opportunity for me. It was a chance to move across the country. Funny enough, I had a 2-month-old at the time when we were moving out here. So, it was a time in my life where a lot of change was already happening. So it was kind of like, hey, what's one more big change? Let's just do that too. But the opportunity was so great. It was so neat to be able to redesign a newscast from the ground up. And over the last 3 years, I mean, we've really broken the mold. We've tried to do something very different with our program, and I don't think it resembles any of the other newscasts in this city. It was just a great chance to do that, and then from Vancouver, I'm going to be here for a little while longer now with the new national. But again, that same kind of work that excites me, the idea of rebuilding and imagining where our program can go, especially in 2017 and beyond, right? Just because the way people get their news is so different. Like I get most of my news not from the television, but from my smartphone, right? Or from my computer. That's where I get most of my news. And I doubt many people are much different. Finding our place in that ecosystem, I think, is an exciting challenge, but there's absolutely potential there. That's what I can speak for the other hosts in saying they're excited about all of that too.
One of the big things that was interesting to me was when they announced the 4 new hosts, I was thinking to myself, okay, and I mentioned this to Ian as well, we're so used to out on the East Coast seeing, or I guess all across Canada, Peter, and if Peter's not there, Wendy's there. So we were thinking they're just going to give it to Wendy. And then when they came out and said, we're going to have 4 new hosts, I was thinking to myself, well, how is that going to work? And then, you got someone in Vancouver, someone in Toronto and Ottawa, and I was like, okay, I get what you're going for, and I do like it. I think it's going to be very interesting. In a sense, I'm wondering if it's going to draw in a little bit of a younger demographic, as you got, not to give anything bad to Peter. He's been there for a while. He deserves to have a happy, healthy retirement. But, these are 4 brand new faces that have experience. Some of us may have seen it, but the approach that I'm hearing that you're taking from it is you get the mold that we don't get our news anymore from papers. We get it online, and you're going to take more of an approach of, really digging into some more stories that maybe don't get as much leeway.
Yeah, and I think, you've made a couple of comparisons now to Peter, and, I'm sure I won't be the first person on the team to tell you that none of us think for a moment that we're replacing Peter. We don't really see it that way at all. And all of us, I think the great thing about the team is that we all come from very different backgrounds, right? And even different paths that we've taken, journalistically speaking. Right? I mean, you look at Adrian's body of work, her experience, right? It's taken her all around the world, and yet she's done very little hosting in the traditional sense, right? And you look at Ian and me, I would say we've come from similar backgrounds in the sense that we've both reported across the country, and we've both done a lot of hosting. And he's done obviously more network stuff. I've been working on the local front for my entire career. So, we're all going to tackle storytelling very differently. And when you raise that point again of people getting their news online and I think demanding something new from the television medium, we are so attuned to that because we live that very experience every day. And so the television program is one thing, but I wouldn't want to leave people with the impression that the television program is the be-all and end-all. The National, as a brand, is so much bigger than just the TV program. And I'm thinking about the digital offering, right, that we'll have, whether it's on social media, whether it's on the website, or whether it's through a podcast, which is something that, very well may be coming down the pipe, not immediately at launch in November, but, early in the new year. So I think there are going to be many, many different touch points throughout the day, and it's not just the flagship program at the end of the day, although, of course, that is a huge part of what we do. But I think it's keeping all of that in mind and having the heft and the resources of the National behind it all, and the strength of storytelling and the dedication to news and to journalism. That's all going to be there. Our hope is just that it'll be there a lot more often and in ways that people will genuinely find accessible, that they don't have to go out of their way to seek it, that it'll come to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that was a good response. I mean, I wasn't trying to compare you guys to Peter. I'm just saying I know each one brings their own element. Now, the only response that I kind of want to make a joke on that one is you mentioned at the National going into a podcast. I mean, oh, you're killing guys like me out there. Unless I'm going to throw in my resume. I'll throw in my resume.
Hey, well, maybe we'll have you on the team. You're the expert, right?
Yeah,
you can put us through the paces.
That'd be awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about the new National. What are you looking forward to in the role?
I think it's really just reimagining the way we deliver stories and the kinds of stories that we deliver. From a personal standpoint, the thing I'm most looking forward to is actually getting out in the field, right? It's doing as little traditional hosting or anchoring as possible, because I think the truly interesting work that the four of us will be able to produce will not necessarily be from inside a studio or from inside the newsroom even. You can do certain stories that way, and of course you can invite prominent and important people into our space, right, in order to do interviews and that sort of thing. But gosh, I want to get out there. I don't want to be bound to my desk 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I think that's probably what I'm most looking forward to, having those opportunities to tell different kinds of stories. And when I say different kinds of stories, one thing that we've talked a lot about just kind of internally, in terms of development of the program. But what I think I can bring to the table is I don't really feel like there's enough positive stories, right? Stories about constructive change and, innovative solutions people have found to everyday problems, whether they're big problems or small problems. And I think there's a way for us to shine a broader light on those kinds of things, because how many times have you spoken to people about the news and the first reaction you get is, oh, I don't really watch, I find it's too depressing. Right? Like, this is something that we hear over and over and over again. There's a place for serious news, absolutely, and unfortunately, much of what is newsworthy is a little depressing. That's kind of the fact of life. I mean, if everything were just normal and status quo, then it's not really news to begin with. But I think there's an avenue there. There's potential for a tweak to the kinds of stories that we deliver to people. And that's particularly one avenue that I think that I'm excited to go down, and that I'm going to have the latitude to go down moving forward.
If, for example, someone comes to a story or pitches one of you a story and just say you don't like it or you don't see yourself doing it, there's another host that might just jump on board and say, yeah, that's something that I definitely want to do. You mentioned about not wanting to be strapped to your desk. I can imagine if someone says, hey, Andrew, we're going out snowboarding or hiking or something with music, you'll jump right on that.
Yeah, or poker, right? Yeah. Like my dream assignment would be if they sent me to the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas, and if I could spend, I mean, it's a wild tournament. It's like more than a month long, I think. But that's something that I would love to bring viewers, because there are so many cool stories happening there. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, in addition to having all kinds of a pretty diverse range of journalistic backgrounds and career paths that we've all taken to get to this point, our interests, personally, right, our hobbies are as varied as anything else. So yeah, of course, you're going to get that range, and everyone's interested in something different. I think if people don't see us bringing that to the table, then we will not have been doing our jobs properly. I think if people see the diversity, behind the team, obviously there's diversity on the surface, but even on a deeper level, right below that surface, such a huge range. And I think that's the other thing that we're all really excited about. And the more opportunities that the four of us have to work together, I think the stronger the program will be. I'm
just hoping that they wouldn't actually put you in the tournament, because then it's basically our money's being spent there. And Andrew Chang places down 1,000. We're at home going, we hope he wins that because that's our money.
But isn't that the ultimate drama? Right?
Yeah.
You're all along for the ride with us.
Yeah.
None of us are bankrolled for that event.
The cameraman like shows your cards, and we're like looking at TV like, oh, how's he going to play this one? So
that would be great TV.
Yeah, it'd be suspenseful. That's for sure. That should be a new series to CBC. The Nationals go to poker. The reason I brought up about the snowboarding and hiking and music is because those are some of the interests I read that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. What other interests that what other interests spark your interest?
You mentioned a few of them. I love outdoorsy things. To be honest with you, I have a lot of interests, but all of my time, funny enough, is family. I mean, my latest interest and my greatest interest is, my two kids. I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. Between work and that, there's pretty much zero time for myself or to do anything else. So that's kind of where the bulk of my time goes. But it's wonderful. Gosh, I don't know if you have kids, but man, I'm a relatively young father, or new father, I should say. My oldest is only 3 years old, and it's a ride. It's a wild ride. It's good times, but boy, is it time consuming.
We've just kind of touched on a little bit about how each one of you are going to be in a different city. You've got, I think, Adrian and Ian will both be in Toronto.
That's right.
And then you have Rosemary here in Ottawa and you in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. So the way that Rosemary told me this, and I just want you to elaborate a little bit on it, is Rosemary was saying the benefit of also having 4 hosts is, you're all on different time frames. So if Rosemary's just say shift ends at 5 or 6, it's still early enough for you to follow up on some of the stories and create some more content, which is something that the National, I won't go as far as say didn't do in the past, but usually when you have one host, it's around just say 4 o'clock is the deadline, whatever stories are done. But now where you have 4 people in different areas, you can update those stories as they're happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think you hit it right on the head that a big strength of me being able to broadcast from Vancouver is that we are able to do it 3 hours later, into the evening than we would otherwise if we were all based in Ottawa or in Toronto. So, the way it'll work is the first edition of the National goes out at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 6 p.m. Pacific time, my time. So I'm on the air as of 6 p.m. broadcasting for that first edition along with all of the other hosts. I'm also broadcasting at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. right through until 11 p.m. when the National goes off the air. So it amounts to 5 hours of broadcasting every night. Now, obviously, it's not 5 straight hours. It's, there are 4 of us, fortunately, mercifully, to split the work. But you're right. I mean, that gives us an incredible latitude, and a latitude that we didn't have before and that other newscasts don't have, just for, understandable logistical reasons. But it'll give us that latitude to be able to cover stories. And think of how many stories break or develop at that hour. A lot of us, joke about how the Trump administration down south, kind of keeps everyone on their toes, keeps us all off guard. And boy, you've got to be ready for any movement on any of those stories so quickly. Wildfires, right? That was another great example. And being positioned in British Columbia, boy, if I wish we had this new program in place a couple months ago during the height of wildfire season in BC, because we would have, fires don't wait for time zones. They don't wait for nice, pretty deadlines or show starts. Those fires can get much worse at any time of day. So for us to be broadcasting here in Vancouver, for me to have the ability to parachute into a hot, no, I don't mean literally parachute in, but to drive out to a hot spot in BC and to host the program from there. From the front lines where firefighters are trying to dig a containment line to keep a fire from getting out of control. Boy, that's an opportunity that would have been very difficult to capitalize on in the past. Not that it couldn't have been done, and not that it isn't done currently, but it's tough. Right, you've got to mobilize a small army to be able to do a remote show from a place like that, in central or northern British Columbia. So that we'll be able to do it much more quickly, in a much more nimble way, I think is going to show on the program. And for years, for all those people who've been watching out in the Pacific time zone and thinking, gosh, why hasn't this been updated over the course of the night? Well, here's our promise to you. Boy, will it ever be updated. We're going to be able to give people the latest pretty much all evening long.
The one thing that I want to mention there, though, is you were talking about, having Excitement TV. I would love to hear the national cue and then just see the parachute of Andrew Chang coming in and saying, this is the national. That would be pretty cool. I'd be like,
I'm writing all these ideas down, by the way.
You're stealing
to my boss.
You're stealing my ideas. I want credit for this. I want a career in this too.
We'll slide your name there in the back credits. It's all good.
The last question I have, of course, you mentioned that you're one of. I don't know. I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing you are the youngest one of the four.
That would be correct. Yes,
so and of course you all got your own credentials, you all have got awards, you all have got the people know who you are, but do they ever kind of rib at you, Andrew? Do they ever kind of give you a little bit of a tug? Because I know when they first announced it, they did this 4 of you hosting, and they made you all say the name. And Rosemary poked fun at Ian, saying his was the best. And then but do they ever rib you in any way because you're the youngest?
A little bit, but the problem is that they know that if they rib me for being the youngest, then I can rib them back for being the eldest.
Yeah.
It works both ways.
That's true.
But no. I mean, we joking aside. I mean, sure that there are jokes here and there, but we get along shockingly well, and that's been something that we've all known each other also for quite a long time. I've known Rosie since her days reporting in the legislature in Quebec, in Quebec City. I've known Adrian on and off. Anytime I would go to Toronto over the last several years, I'd always bump into her. We'd always have chats, and she is such a warm, inviting person. You could know her for a day, and you'd feel like you knew her for a year or 10. And Ian, I've been here in the same newsroom with him for the last 3 years. So we've all kind of gotten to know each other, and many of them have known each other for much longer than that. So no, we get along really, really great, and yes. There's some joking, but it goes both ways.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Andrew Chang for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, thanks for listening, and good night.